A young virgin gives her virginity to a millionaire she barely knew. A millionaire marked by losses, silences, and a desire that turned into a curse. If this story interests you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us from which city you are watching us following. The soft touch of yellowed pages was the only constant in Olivia Marin's life. In the small living room of her rented apartment, books formed unstable towers around the worn sofa, silent witnesses to an existence built on the margins of solitude. The afternoon light filtered lazily through the fogged window, painting shadows on the manuscripts spread out on the coffee table, unfinished translations of obscure novels that few would read, but that paid their bills as irregularly as they arrived. At 22, Olivia carried in her eyes the depth of someone who had learned too early the taste of absence. Born in the silence of the nuns in an orphanage in the mountains, her origins had been consumed, along with the archives, in a fire that seemed to have been orchestrated by Providence itself to keep her eternally ignorant of her roots. From the past, all that remained was a scar on her right hip, a crescent-shaped mark that sometimes burned as if trying to tell a story that her mind could not reach. That June afternoon, as she struggled with the translation of an Italian Gothic novel, the phone rang. It was the kind of call that divides life into before and after, though she didn't know it yet. The voice on the other end belonged to a middle-aged woman who introduced herself as a representative of the Aurora Foundation. The name sounded vaguely familiar, perhaps from some newspaper headline or forgotten conversation. "Miss Marin," the voice had the precision of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "We are looking for someone with your specific profile for a peculiar position. Your experience with literary translations and elderly care caught our attention." Olivia adjusted her wire-rimmed glasses, trying to remember where she'd left her resume. It had been months since she'd applied for any position. "How did you find my contact information?" "The Foundation has its resources," the answer came with an audible smile. "The work is simple, but it requires exclusive dedication. Mrs. Helena Aurora needs a personal reader, someone who can be her eyes, her voice, and perhaps more than that." The offer was surreal. A salary equivalent to 6 months of her translations, her own apartment on the family property, premium health insurance, and an initial 1-year contract, all to read books to an old woman who had lost her sight. There was an implicit but in every unspoken word, in every calculated pause the woman made on the phone. "Why me?" Olivia asked, her fingers unconsciously tracing the scar through the thin fabric of her blouse. "Sometimes, Miss Marin, the right people just didn't appear. Mrs. Aurora is quite specific in her wishes. She asked for someone young with her exact background, her height, even her body type. Let's just say the universe conspired in her favor." The email address led her to one of São Paulo's most exclusive neighborhoods, the Aurora family's mansion. Was a 19th century building that looked like it had been transplanted straight from a Victorian novel into the middle of São Paulo's urban chaos. Wrought iron gates guarded a garden that looked more like a domesticated forest, where ancient statues peered out from the dense vegetation. The next morning, Olivia walked through the gates, feeling the weight of 1,000 invisible gazes. The garden exuded a sweet, poisonous scent, as if the flowers held secrets in their perfumes. The mansion rose before her like an unholy cathedral, its tall windows reflecting the morning light like watchful eyes. The same woman who had spoken on the phone greeted her at the entrance, Regina Torres, the family's personal assistant. For 2 decades, her impeccable suit and necklace of genuine pearls contrasted with a barely concealed uneasiness in her eyes. "Welcome to your new home," she said, leading Olivia through a foyer that could have held her entire apartment. The interior of the mansion was a maze of polished hallways, antique tapestries, and an impressive collection of mirrors covered in white sheets. "Mrs. Helena has her quirks," Regina explained, noticing Olivia's puzzled look. "Since she lost her sight, she can't stand the idea of uncovered mirrors. She says they capture more than just reflections." As they climbed the main staircase, Olivia noticed that some of the steps creaked differently, as if they hid passages or secrets within their wooden interior. The air grew thicker with each step, heavy with history, and the weight of generations of Auroras who had inhabited these walls. It was in the second-floor hallway that she first saw him. Arthur Aurora emerged from one of the doorways like a materialized shadow, and the air around him seemed to bend with his presence. Tall, with aristocratic features softened by a neatly trimmed beard and eyes so dark they bordered on black, he carried about him an aura of natural authority that made Olivia instinctively hold her breath. Their gazes met for a moment that seemed to stretch time itself. There was something familiar in that look, like an echo from a long-forgotten dream. Arthur studied her with clinical intensity, his eyes lingering for a split second on the spot where she knew his scar was, even though it was covered by his clothes. "Mr. Aurora," Regina broke the moment with her professional voice, "this is Olivia Marin, your mother's new reader." Arthur didn't smile, didn't extend his hand, didn't make any of the expected gestures of social courtesy. He simply inclined his head slightly, his eyes never leaving hers. "Welcome to the Aurora home, Miss Marin." His voice was deep, with a slight European accent. "I hope you are prepared for what awaits you here." Before Olivia could respond, he had already turned and disappeared down the hallway, leaving only the echo of his footsteps on the marble and an unsettling feeling that his words carried, a warning she was not yet ready to comprehend. Regina led her to a suite on the third floor, a surprisingly cozy space overlooking the back gardens. "Your things have been brought in and organized," she informed him. "Miss Helena is expecting you in the library in an hour. I suggest you use this time to familiarize yourself with your new home." She paused, as if weighing her next words. "And Miss Marin, there are rules in this house, some written, some unwritten. The first is never enter a room with covered mirrors after sunset. The second is do not accept invitations to the West Wing after 11 p.m. And the third, perhaps most important, if you hear music coming from the library when you are alone, do not enter, no matter who seems to be calling." With those enigmatic words, Regina left her alone in the room that would be her new home. Olivia walked to the window, looking out over the gardens below. An ancient fountain dominated the center, its dark, water reflecting the sky like a liquid mirror. For a moment, she thought she saw a face in the water, not her reflection, but someone else's, a woman who might have been her in another life. She shook her head, pushing away the unsettling feeling. She was letting the Gothic atmosphere of the mansion affect her imagination. But as she prepared to meet Helena Aurora, she couldn't shake the feeling that every step she took into the house was taking her deeper into a mystery that had begun long before she was born. In the bathroom mirror, the only one uncovered on the entire floor, her reflection looked different, as if something had fundamentally changed in her the moment she had walked through the Aurora gates. Her scar pulsed, faintly beneath her clothing, a silent omen of things to come. Somewhere in the mansion, a piano began to play a familiar melody she was certain she had never heard before. The Aurora Library was a sanctuary of dark wood and ancient books that rose 2 full stories high. The scent of aged paper and leather mingled with the peculiar scent of dried roses, creating an atmosphere that made Olivia feel simultaneously at home and completely out of place. Helena Aurora sat in a Victorian chair near one of the arched windows, her elegant figure silhouetted against the afternoon light that poured in golden shafts through the stained glass windows. "You have her same steps," were the first words. Helena spoke before Olivia could even introduce herself. Her voice had a musical quality, as if each word had been chosen not just for its meaning but for its sound. Light, but determined, like someone who knows exactly where they're going, even when the destination is uncertain. Olivia stopped a few steps from the chair, studying the woman before her. Helena must have been extraordinarily beautiful in her youth, and even now, with her white hair elegantly arranged and her face lined with age, she maintained a dignity that bordered on regal. Her eyes, though clouded by blindness, seemed to see beyond the physical. "Lady Aurora," Olivia began, but was interrupted by a gentle gesture. "Helena, please, let's leave the formalities to strangers, and you, my dear, have not been a stranger for a long time." An enigmatic smile played on her lips. "Come, sit here close to me. I want to feel your face." With a hesitation she couldn't explain, Olivia approached and knelt beside the chair. Helena's hands, surprisingly firm and warm, touched her face with the delicacy of someone reading a text in Braille. Her fingers traced every contour, lingering on the apples of her cheeks, the curve of her chin, the line of her lips. "Extraordinary," Helena murmured, letting her hands fall into her lap. "Time moves in circles sometimes, doesn't it? We begin. Today what began so long ago?" "I don't understand," Olivia admitted, feeling an inexplicable shiver run down her spine. "You don't have to understand, not yet. For now, let's stick to what's simple and clear. You're here to be my reader, my companion, maybe even my confidant. The books are organized by date of purchase, not by author or subject. Each one has a story beyond its pages. We'll start with that one." She pointed with surprising precision to a distant shelf, the red leather volume, third shelf from the left. The book in question was a first edition of a 19th-century Italian Gothic novel. Its pages reeked of secrets kept for generations. As Olivia opened it, an old photograph slipped from between the pages and fluttered to the floor. She bent to pick it up, but Helena was quicker, her fingers finding the paper with a precision that defied her blindness. "Some things should remain hidden until the right time," she said, tucking the photo into the pocket of her silk dress. "Now, read. Start with the prologue." The next few hours passed in a time bubble of their own, as Olivia read the story of a young girl who uncovered dark secrets about her family in an ancient Italian village. Her voice filled the library like music, and sometimes Helena made comments that seemed to refer to real events rather than the fiction being told. The sun was already setting when they were interrupted by the sound of firm footsteps on the marble floor. Arthur Aurora entered the library like a materialized shadow, his impeccable dark suit contrasting with the paleness of his skin. He stopped when he saw Olivia sitting at her mother's feet, an indefinable expression crossing her face for an instant. "I see you've already started." His voice was controlled, but there was an underlying tension that made Olivia straighten instinctively. "Arthur, my son," Helena smiled, extending a hand that he readily took. "Your new assistant has a voice that could wake the dead, or perhaps put them to an even deeper sleep." Something about the choice of words made Olivia shiver. Arthur was watching her with a disturbing intensity, as if searching for something in her face that only he could see. "Miss Marin," he addressed her for the first time since their brief encounter in the hallway, "I hope you are finding everything to your liking." "Yes, Mr. Aurora," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady under the weight of his gaze. "Your mother is fascinating company." "Helena has that effect on people," he commented, a humorless smile curving his lips. "She always knows more than she should, about everything and everyone." "And what about you, my son?" Helena interrupted, her voice carrying a note of challenge. "What should Miss Marin know about you?" The air in the library seemed to grow thicker, thick with unspoken tension. Arthur released his mother's hand slowly, his eyes never leaving Olivia's face. "Just what is necessary," he replied after a moment that seemed to stretch on for eternities. "That I am responsible for this house and its secrets, and that some of those secrets have teeth." With these enigmatic words he turned to leave. However, he stopped at the door and without turning back added, "Miss Marin, after dinner, I would like to see you in my office. There are details of your contract that we need to discuss." After he left, the silence in the library seemed to gain physical weight. Helena sighed, her fingers drumming softly on the arm of the chair. "My son has always been very much like his father," she said, as if speaking to herself. "The same intensity, the same ability to transform the air around him into electricity, and the same demons, unfortunately." Olivia wanted to ask more, wanted to understand what was going on beneath the surface of this seemingly perfect family, but something in Helena's tone suggested that direct questions wouldn't receive truthful answers. "His office is in the West Wing," Helena continued, her voice taking on a tone of veiled warning. "Remember the house rules, my dear. After 11 o'clock, that part of the mansion belongs to the shadows." "Regina mentioned something similar," Olivia admitted, feeling a shiver run down her spine. "But I don't understand why." Helena smiled, a smile that seemed to carry the weight of decades of secrets. Some rules exist to protect us from ourselves. Others, she paused meaningfully, exist to protect others from who we really are. The rest of the afternoon passed with Helena giving instructions about her reading routine, but Olivia had trouble concentrating. Her mind kept returning to Arthur Aurora and his enigmatic invitation. The sun was beginning to set, painting the library with shades of red and gold that made the shadows seem deeper and more vivid. When she finally left the library to prepare for dinner, Olivia had the distinct feeling that she was being watched. She turned quickly, only to see one of the covered mirrors moving slightly, as if someone or something had just passed, behind the white sheet covering it. In her room as she prepared for dinner, the scar on her hip began to sting in a way she hadn't felt in years. Looking at herself in the mirror, Olivia had the momentary impression that she saw someone else, reflected back, a woman with her face but older eyes, wearing a period dress that looked as if it had been stained red. He blinked, and the image was gone. But the feeling that he was about to discover something terrible and wonderful remained, pulsing in his chest like a second heart. Dinner at the Aurora mansion was served precisely at 8 o'clock in a dining room that looked as if it had been transplanted straight from a European palace. Venetian glass caught the light from the chandeliers, creating unique constellations on the tissue-papered walls. Helena sat at the head of the table with the same ethereal grace as always, while Arthur sat to her right, leaving a vacant spot on the left, where Olivia was instructed to sit. The silence was broken only by the clink of silverware and the occasional whisper of glasses being filled with a red wine that Arthur had personally selected. Olivia watched fascinated as Helena navigated the dinner with a precision that defied her blindness, every movement a dance choreographed by years of repetition. "Tell me about your translations, Miss Marin." Arthur broke the silence abruptly, his eyes fixed on her with that disturbing intensity that seemed to be his trademark. "I am particularly interested in how someone so young developed an affinity for such obscure texts." Olivia took a sip of wine to buy time, feeling the liquid warm her body. "Gothic literature has always appealed to me," she said carefully. "There's something about stories about family secrets and old houses that feels familiar." "Familiar," Helena repeated the word, as if savoring its meaning. "What an interesting word for someone who grew up without knowing her own family, don't you think, Arthur?" The air seemed to freeze for a moment. Arthur kept his eyes fixed on his plate, but Olivia could see his fingers tighten slightly on the handle of his knife. "Mother?" His voice held a warning tone. "Oh, don't look at me like that, dear." Helena smiled, her unseeing eyes focused on some point beyond immediate reality. "We all know that coincidences are rarely accidental in this house." Before Arthur could respond, a distant clap of thunder shook the windows. The storm that had threatened all day was finally arriving, bringing with it a premature darkness that made the shadows in the corners of the room seem deeper and more restless. "The weather is changing," Helena commented casually, as if she hadn't just created a palpable tension at the table. "Olivia, dear, have you noticed we have a piano in the library? It's an old Steinway, a wedding gift from my late husband. It used to play magnificently before the accident," Arthur finished, his voice thick with an emotion Olivia couldn't decipher. "Maybe it's best we don't talk about that. Right now, Mom?" "Why not?" Helena tilted her head, an enigmatic smile playing on her lips. "Miss Marin will figure it all out eventually. The walls of this house have memories, son, and some memories are particularly persistent." Lightning lit the room, casting grotesque shadows across the walls. For a moment, Olivia thought she saw figures dancing in the reflections of the crystals, silhouettes in ancient gowns twirling in a silent waltz. "Miss Marin," Arthur's voice brought her back to reality. "We still need to discuss your contract. My office in half an hour?" She nodded, feeling the weight of his gaze like something physical. Helena smiled again, that smile that seemed to hold 1,000 secrets. "Remember, my dear, some doors, once opened, can never be closed again." The rest of dinner passed in a silence laden with unspoken meaning. When the plates were cleared, Arthur stood up first, disappearing into the halls of the mansion like a shadow. Helena asked to be escorted to her chambers, and as they walked through the corridors, lit only by the light of lightning, she held Olivia's arm with surprising strength. "There's a mirror in his office," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the roar of the thunder. "One of the few that remain uncovered. When you look into it, don't believe everything you see. Sometimes reflections show what might have been, not what is." Before Olivia could question the meaning of those words, they reached Helena's chambers. Lady Aurora stood in the doorway, her face a mask of motherly concern that was at odds with the shrewd gleam in her unseeing eyes. "One last thing," she said, her voice now firm and clear. "If he offers you anything beyond a work contract, remember, in the Aurora family, nothing is given without a price, and some prices are paid in currencies you don't yet know." With these enigmatic words, Helena entered her chambers, leaving Olivia alone in the hallway with her doubts, and the distant echo of the piano that she could have sworn had begun to play by itself in the library. The walk to Arthur's office in the West Wing seemed longer than it should have been in a normal house. The corridors stretched like the arteries of a living organism, pulsing with the shadows cast by lightning. Each step made the ancient wooden floorboards groan, as if the house itself protested his presence there. When she finally reached the door to the office, Olivia hesitated. The clock in the hallway read 10:45 p.m., still within the time allowed by the mysterious rules of the house, but too close to the limit for comfort. Through the dark wood of the door, she could hear the sound of papers being shuffled and the occasional clink of a glass. He took a deep breath and knocked. Arthur's voice, deep and commanding, answered immediately. "Come in, Miss Marin, I've been waiting for you." The office was exactly as she had imagined it would be. Walls lined with books, dark wood furniture, an antique Persian rug that muffled her footsteps, and, as Helena had warned, a huge mirror dominated one wall, a gilt-framed Venetian mirror that seemed to absorb and reflect the light from the lightning in a peculiar way. Arthur was standing by the window, watching the storm. Without turning around, he gestured to a leather chair near his desk. "Please have a seat. Would you like a drink?" "No, thank you," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady as she sat up. Her eyes kept being drawn to the mirror, where she constantly felt like she saw movement at the edges of her vision. He finally turned around, and Olivia felt the air rush out of her lungs. In the intimate confines of the office, lit only by a single lamp and the occasional flash of lightning, Arthur Aurora seemed even more intense, more dangerous. There was something almost predatory about the way he moved toward her desk, his movements fluid as a large cat's. "I believe you've realized by now that this is no ordinary job," he began, his voice low and controlled, "and that you weren't chosen by chance." Olivia felt a chill run down her spine as she watched Arthur approach with a sealed envelope in his hands. The storm outside had intensified, and each flash of lightning seemed to photograph that moment in flashes of harsh light that turned the shadows of the office into silent spectators. "What do you mean you weren't chosen by chance?" she asked, her voice firmer than she felt inside. The scar on her hip throbbed as if responding to his nearness. Arthur placed the envelope on the table between them and sat on the edge of his desk, too close for comfort to Olivia. His eyes, when they met hers, seemed to contain all the darkness of the night outside. "There are certain marks we carry," he said, his gaze dropping briefly to where he knew her scar was. "Signs that connect us to stories larger than ourselves. You've been dreaming of this place, haven't you? Even before you knew it existed." Olivia's heart skipped a beat. It was true. There were recurring dreams that had haunted her since childhood. Dreams of endless hallways covered, mirrors and piano music that seemed to call her name. But how could he know that? "I don't know what you're talking about," he lied, his fingers unconsciously tightening on the arms of the chair. A humorless smile curved Arthur's lips. "Lying doesn't suit you, Miss Marin. Your eyes, they're too honest, like hers." "Who is she?" Olivia asked, though a part of her already knew the answer, or at least feared knowing it. In response, Arthur opened a desk drawer and pulled out an old photograph. The image showed a young woman, perhaps a few years older than Olivia, wearing period dress. She was in profile, smiling at someone out of the frame, but even from that angle the resemblance was undeniable. "Katerina Marin," Arthur said the name like a prayer. She worked in this house in 1993. She was my mother's private reader, just like you are now. The resemblance is extraordinary, don't you think? Olivia took the photo with trembling hands. It was like looking into a mirror that showed not her reflection, but a slightly different version of herself. The same delicate bone structure, the same large expressive eyes, even the same way she tilted her head. "What happened to her?" he asked, although something inside him screamed at him not to ask the question. Arthur stood abruptly and walked to the window, his back stiff as if carrying an invisible weight. "She disappeared. A stormy night much like this one. She left behind only—" He paused meaningfully. "A newborn daughter." The world seemed to spin around Olivia. The pieces began to fall into place. The Aurora's specific interest in her, Helena's enigmatic observations, the sense of familiarity with the mansion. "Are you suggesting that she—" His voice trailed off. "Was it your mother?" Arthur finished, turning to face her. "I'm not suggesting anything, Miss Marin. I'm stating it. We have the DNA tests to prove it. But there's more, much more that you need to know." He approached again, this time stopping directly in front of her. His presence was oppressive, a mix of natural authority and something more primitive, more dangerous. "What I'm about to propose goes beyond a typical employment contract," he continued, his voice dropping to a whisper. "It's a chance to discover the truth about your past, about who you really are. But there's a price." "What kind of price?" Olivia asked, her mouth suddenly dry. Arthur leaned forward, bracing his hands on the arms of her chair, effectively trapping her. His face was close enough that she could smell his scent, a mix of sandalwood and something darker, more primitive. "A pact," he replied, his eyes fixed on hers with hypnotic intensity. "You will have access to all the secrets of this house, all the answers you seek, but in return you must give me something that only you can offer." "And what would that be?" "Your truth," he replied, one finger lightly tracing the line of her jaw. "Your essence, your first time." Olivia felt the blood run cold in her veins. "You're asking me to—" "Not now," he interrupted, pulling away slightly. "Not until you know the whole truth. One question a day, that's the deal. You can ask me anything about your past, about your mother, about this house. I will answer you with absolute honesty. And when all your questions are answered, when you fully understand who you are and why you are here, then—" "So you want me to give myself to you?" she finished, her voice shaking slightly. A particularly bright flash of lightning illuminated the office, and for a moment, in the reflection in the mirror, Olivia saw something impossible. She and Arthur, dressed in period costume, dancing a silent waltz. She blinked, and the image was gone. "Our meetings will always be at 11:23 p.m., Arthur continued, seemingly oblivious to what she had seen in the mirror. "Why this specific time will be one of your questions to discover. You will have complete freedom to ask any questions, but you must accept the answers without questioning their veracity. And you must understand that once you start, there is no going back." Olivia stood, needing to put some physical distance between them so she could think clearly. "What if I refuse? Then you will remain just my mother's reader. Your salary will be paid, your needs met, but the answers you seek will remain forever beyond your reach." He paused meaningfully. "And that pain, that emptiness you have felt, for as long as you can remember, will remain your only constant companion." How did he know? How could he know so well that loneliness that consumed her, that perpetual feeling of being incomplete, of being a puzzle with crucial pieces missing? "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Arthur moved closer again, this time with an almost tender softness. His hand rose to her face, fingers lightly brushing her cheek. "Because some stories need to be concluded. Some circles need to be closed. And because you, Olivia Marin, are the key to a mystery that has haunted this house for longer than you can imagine." The clock on the wall read 11:23 p.m., and as if responding to some invisible signal, the piano in the library began to play, the same melody that had haunted Olivia's dreams all her life. "You have until tomorrow night to decide," Arthur said, stepping away. "Same time, same place. If you accept, bring a question. If you decline—" He left the sentence unfinished, but the weight of the unsaid hung between them like smoke. Olivia left the office as if emerging from a fever dream, her legs shaking slightly. In the hallway, the shadows seemed denser, more vivid. The piano continued to play, its melody echoing through the halls like an ancient call. In her room, lying in bed but unable to sleep, she watched the lightning dance across the ceiling as her mind whirled with possibilities and questions. The photo of Katerina, her mother, was clutched in her hands, and each time a flash of lightning lit up the room, the face in the image seemed to change subtly, as if it were trying to tell her something across the decades that separated them. The scar on her hip pulsed with an urgency of its own, as if it recognized something her conscious mind could not yet comprehend. Somewhere in the mansion, the piano finally fell silent, but its echo remained, reverberating in the depths of her soul like a promise, or perhaps a warning. Morning came thick with mist and the damp scent of the storm that had passed. Olivia had not slept, her hours consumed by contemplating Katerina's photograph and the incessant dance of thoughts about Arthur's proposal. The mirror in her bathroom looked different in the grey morning light, deeper, as if it might swallow her. Reflection if she stared at it for too long. Helena was waiting for her in the library as usual, but there was something different about her posture, a subtle tension that suggested she knew exactly what had happened the night before. "You have questions," Mrs. Aurora said, as Olivia sat down next to her. It wasn't a question. "Did you know about my mother?" Helena smiled, that enigmatic smile that seemed to be her trademark. "I know many things, my dear. Some I wish I didn't. Others that are precisely why I'm still alive." Her fingers found Olivia's with surprising precision. "But the real question is, are you ready for the answers? Arthur offered me a deal." "Ah, yes, the pact." Helena let out a soft laugh that held no humor at all. "My son has always been traditional in these regards. Some traditions, however, carry poison in their roots." Before Olivia could question the meaning of those words, Regina appeared in the library doorway, her usually composed face betraying signs of concern. "Mrs. Helena, there is a visitor. Father Joachim is here." The change in atmosphere was immediate. Helena sat up straight in her chair, all her previous softness replaced by an aristocratic stiffness. "Show him in." The man who entered the library looked nothing like the traditional image of a priest. Tall and thin, with disheveled grey hair and eyes so pale they bordered on the unearthly, he carried about him an aura of discomfort, as if his very existence were a walking contradiction. "Helena," he greeted with a curt nod, his eyes locking, with Olivia's with a disturbing intensity. "So it's true, she's back." "Don't be dramatic, Joachim," Helena replied, but there was an almost imperceptible tremor in her voice. "This is Olivia Marin, my new reader." The priest stepped closer to Olivia, his eyes never leaving her face. "The resemblance is disturbing, but the mark, show me the mark." Olivia instinctively recoiled, her hand automatically going to her hip, where the scar throbbed as if responding to the priest's presence. "Enough, Joachim," Helena's voice cut through the air like steel. "You have no authority here." "Haven't I?" He laughed, a harsh, mirthless sound. "I was there, Helena. That night, I saw what happened in the rose garden. I saw what your husband did, what you all did." "Father Joachim," a new voice joined the conversation. Arthur was standing in the library doorway, his face a mask of politeness that barely disguised an underlying threat. "I do not recall authorizing you to enter my property." The priest turned slowly, a crooked smile distorting his features. "Ah, young Aurora, still trying to control the uncontrollable? Some doors, once opened, cannot be closed. Some debts must be paid." "Leave," Arthur ordered, his voice low but filled with authority, "before I am forced to take less uncivilized measures." For a moment it seemed as if the priest would resist. His eyes returned to Olivia, and she felt as if he were trying to convey some silent message. Then, as abruptly as he had arrived, he turned to leave. At the door he paused and, without turning, said, "History repeats itself, but not always in the same way." Be careful what you seek in the shadows, girl. Some truths are worse than lies. The silence that followed his departure was heavy as lead. Arthur remained in the doorway, his rigid posture betraying a tension that his carefully controlled face tried to hide. Who was he? Olivia finally asked, her voice sounding small in the oppressive silence of the library. No one, Helena replied quickly, but Arthur interrupted her. No, Mother, no more lies. He stepped closer to Olivia, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her heart race. Father Joachim was the one who baptized you, Olivia. He was the one who found you the morning after your mother, after she left. He was excommunicated, Helena added, her voice thick with bitterness, for reasons we are not to discuss. Olivia felt the world spin around her. Each new piece of information seemed to open up dozens of new questions, each answer only deepening. The mystery surrounding her. The rose garden, she murmured, remembering the priest's words. What happened there? That, Arthur replied, an enigmatic smile curving his lips, can be your first question tonight, if you accept my deal. Helena made a sound of protest, but Arthur silenced her with a look. It's time she knew the truth. Mother, all of it. The rest of the day passed like a fever dream. Olivia tried to concentrate on her reading assignments, but the words danced before her eyes, morphing into incomprehensible symbols. The piano's presence in the library felt more oppressive than ever, as if the instrument were alive and conscious, waiting for the right moment to reveal its own secrets. As the afternoon wore on, the mist that had dominated the morning began to thicken, turning the mansion's gardens into a maze of hazy shadows. From her window, Olivia gazed out at the rose garden, now just a dark patch in the misty landscape. Something had happened there, something that connected her mother, the Auroras, and that disturbing priest in a web of secrets and possible tragedies. The scar on his hip throbbed with renewed intensity, as if it were trying to communicate something crucial. In the bathroom mirror, his reflection looked more and more like Katerina's photo, or maybe it was just the afternoon shadows playing tricks on his perception. At 11:22 p.m., she found herself standing in front of Arthur's office door, her heart pounding frantically against her ribs. She had made her decision. The questions that had haunted her entire life were stronger than any fear or apprehension. The clock struck 11:23, and before he could knock on the door, Arthur's voice sounded from inside the office. "Come in, Olivia. It's time." The office was different that night. The lights had been dimmed to a minimum, and strategically placed candles created an almost ritualistic ambience. Arthur stood by the window, as he had the night before, but there was something different about his posture, a restrained tension, as if he were bracing himself for something inevitable. "You came," he said without turning around, his deep voice reverberating in the silence of the room. "Do I have a choice?" Olivia replied, closing the door behind her. The sound of the latch echoing like a final sentence. Arthur finally turned around, and the candlelight danced across his face, creating shadows that seemed to have a life of their own. "We always have choices, Olivia. The question is whether we're prepared to live with the consequences." He walked over to his desk and opened a drawer, pulling out an old book bound in dark red leather. The same type of leather, Olivia noticed with a shiver, that lined the walls of the office. "Before you ask your first question," he continued, "I need you to fully understand the rules of this agreement." His fingers stroked the cover of the book with disturbing intimacy. "Every answer I give comes with a price, not in money or petty favors, but in truth for truth. For every secret I reveal, you must give me one of yours." "What kind of secret?" Olivia asked, her mouth suddenly dry. An enigmatic smile curved Arthur's lips. "Something you've never told anyone, something you keep deep in your soul. And it must be true, I'll know if you lie." Olivia felt a shiver run down her spine. How could he know? But there was something in his eyes, an almost supernatural intensity that made her believe it. "And in the end," she began, but he interrupted her. "In the end, when all your questions are answered, when you know the full truth about your past, about your mother, about this house—" He paused, approaching her with the predatory grace that seemed to be his trademark. "You will be mine, completely, without reservation." The air between them felt electrified. Olivia could feel the heat emanating from his body, mixed with that unique scent of sandalwood and something more primal. "Why is virginity so important?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Arthur took a step back, a flash of something, pain, regret, crossing his face. "That can be your first official question if you wish. But remember, once asked, there's no going back." Olivia took a deep breath. The scar on her hip was beating like a second heart. "No, my first question is about the Rose Garden. What happened there in 1993? A heavy silence fell over the office. For a moment, only the flickering of candles and the ticking of the clock filled the room. Arthur walked over to one of the bookshelves, his fingers tracing the spines of the books as if searching for inspiration or courage. "It was a night like this," he began, his voice taking on an almost hypnotic tone. "Thick fog, full moon. Your mother had discovered something she wasn't supposed to know. About ancient rituals, about pacts made with forces most people would rather pretend don't exist." He turned to face her, his eyes reflecting the candlelight like liquid obsidian. "Katerina was special, like you. She had the same mark, the same ability to see beyond appearances. She found my father's journals, learned the truth about the Aurora fortune, about the price each generation had to pay." "What price?" Olivia couldn't help but ask. Arthur smiled, but there was no humor in his eyes. "A question a night, remember? But to complete the garden story, Katerina confronted my father that night. She was pregnant, with you, and she swore she would not allow the cycle to continue. There was an argument, the ritual was interrupted. What happened after that?" He paused meaningfully. "Well, that will have to wait for another night." "But she disappeared after that," Olivia insisted, frustrated at the story being interrupted at the crucial moment. "Yes and no." Arthur stepped closer again, this time stopping just inches from her. "Now it's your turn. Truth? Tell me a secret. Something you've never shared with anyone." Olivia closed her eyes, feeling the weight of that moment. There was a secret she had carried since childhood, something she had never had the courage to admit, not even to herself. "Sometimes," she began, her voice shaking slightly, "when I was a child in the orphanage, I would wake up in the middle of the night and see a woman standing next to my bed. She never spoke, just smiled and caressed my face. She had the same face as in Katerina's picture. For years I thought it was just dreams, but—" She opened her eyes, meeting Arthur's intense gaze. "The mark on my hip always burned on those nights?" Arthur sucked in a breath, something wild and primal crossing his face for an instant. His hands reached up as if to touch her face, but stopped millimeters from her skin. "The first secret has been accepted," he murmured, his voice husky. "You learn quickly, Olivia, but the next ones will have to be more deep." The clock on the wall began to chime, marking the end of that first session. Arthur pulled away abruptly, as if he needed to create physical distance between them to maintain control. "Same time tomorrow," he said, his voice regaining some of its usual composure. "Come prepared with your next question, and—" He hesitated, something vulnerable crossing his face. "Be careful around Father Joachim, he's not what he seems." Olivia left the office feeling simultaneously lighter and heavier. The answers she had received had only raised more questions, and the feeling that she was diving into something much bigger and more dangerous than she could have imagined would not leave her. In the hallway, the shadows seemed thicker, more vivid. The piano in the library began to play that familiar melody, but this time there was something different in the tone, a note of warning, perhaps, or of lament. In her room, Olivia spent hours in front of the mirror, studying her reflection, searching for traces of Katerina in her features. The scar on her hip seemed to pulse with an energy of its own, as if it were trying to tell its own version of the story. Lying in bed, unable to sleep, she replayed every word Arthur had said, every nuance of his expression. There was something in his eyes when he spoke of Katerina, a mixture of pain, guilt, and something deeper, more disturbing. And then there was the question of virginity, of the almost ritual importance he seemed to attach to it. Why was it so crucial? What else was there to this business of rituals and pacts with unknown forces? Outside, the mist had completely engulfed the rose garden, turning it into an indistinct blur in the darkness. Somewhere inside the mansion, the piano continued to play its lonely melody, as if it was trying to tell a story that only the dead could fully understand. The morning brought with it a fine, persistent rain that turned the mansion's gardens into a blurry watercolor. Olivia found Helena already in her usual spot in the library, but there was something different in her posture, a tension that suggested she knew exactly what was going on between her son and his young reader. "You started the game," Helena said as soon as Olivia sat down. "It wasn't a question. How do you know?" An enigmatic smile curved Lady Aurora's lips. "The walls of this house have ears, my dear, and some stories need to be told more than once to be fully understood." Before Olivia could question the meaning of those words, Regina appeared in the library doorway, her usually composed face betraying signs of disturbance. "Mrs. Helena, forgive the interruption, but—" She hesitated, casting a meaningful glance at Olivia. "We found something in the rose garden." Helena sat up straight in her chair, all her attention focused on Regina. "What exactly?" "A box buried near the spring. And there's letters addressed to Miss Marin." The air in the library seemed to grow thicker. Olivia felt her scar throb with renewed intensity, as if responding to the mention of the letters. "Bring them here," Helena ordered, her voice brooking no dispute. Minutes later, Regina returned with an ancient metal box, stained by time and dirt. The metal was rusted in places, but it was still possible to make out elaborate carvings on its surface, symbols that Olivia didn't recognize, but that made her skin crawl. "Open," Helena instructed, her sightless eyes fixed on a point beyond immediate reality. With trembling hands, Olivia lifted the lid of the box. Inside, carefully preserved in brown paper envelopes, were several letters. The handwriting on the first envelope was elegant and flowing. "To my daughter, when she is ready to understand." "Read it," Helena whispered, her voice thick with an emotion Olivia couldn't identify. The paper was yellowed with age, but the words remained clear, as if they had been written only yesterday. "My dear daughter, if you are reading this, it means that you have found your way back to the Aurora mansion. It also means that the time has come, the time of the truths that could not be told, of the secrets that were buried along with the roses in this cursed garden. There are things you need to know about who you are, about what the mark you bear means. It's not just a scar, it's a seal, a symbol of a power that has run in our blood for generations. The women of our lineage have always been different, always seen beyond the veil that separates this world from the next. The Auroras know this. That's why they seek us out, generation after generation. That's why Arthur will try to seduce you with promises of truth and knowledge. But be careful. There are prices too high to pay, even in the name of love. Yes, love. Because that's what he'll offer, even if he doesn't use that word. Aurora men have that gift, the gift of making us fall in love with them, even when we know that love can destroy us. I fell in love with his father. Fernando Aurora was everything a woman could. Wish for, charming, powerful, mysterious. But there was darkness in him, a darkness that came from generations of pacts and rituals that you will hear about again. The Aurora fortune didn't come from hard work and smart investments alone. There's blood in that money, sacrifice in every stone of this mansion, and they need us, women with the brand, women with the gift to keep the cycle going. But you, my daughter, you are different. You are the first one born outside the cycle, the first one who can break it. That is why I had to leave. That is why I had to leave you, to give you the chance that I did not have. There are more letters in this box. Each one contains a part of the story, a piece of the puzzle. But don't read them all at once. Some truths need time to be digested. Some revelations can be devastating if they come too soon. And above all, remember, when Arthur talks about the ritual, about the importance of your purity, Know that there is more at stake than he is saying. Your virginity is not just a symbol. It is power, it is protection. The moment you surrender to him, the cycle can begin again, or it could be broken forever. The choice, my beloved daughter, will be yours. With all my love and all my pain. Catherine. Olivia dropped the letter into her lap, her hands shaking. Helena sat motionless in her chair, but there were tears streaming down her face. "You knew," Olivia accused, her voice cracking. "You knew all along." "Yes," Helena admitted softly, "but some truths need to be discovered, not revealed. Some stories need to be lived to be understood." "What happened to her? To my mother? She is alive?" Helena finished, a sad smile, curving her lips. "That's a question you should save for tonight, for Arthur." As if summoned by her mention, the library door opened and Arthur walked in. His face was pale, his eyes fixed on the metal box on the table. "I see it started earlier today," he said, his voice controlled but tense. "But some revelations must wait for the right moment, the right time." 23, Olivia muttered, remembering the rule. "Exactly." He reached out, taking the box with surprising gentleness. "Until then, this will stay with me. All in good time, Olivia. All truth in its moment." She wanted to protest, wanted to demand immediate answers, but something in his gaze stopped her. There was pain there, an ancient, deep pain that echoed her own. "Tonight," he promised, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Bring your questions. Bring your secrets, and maybe together we can find a way through this darkness." With those words he left, taking with him the box and the promises of answers it contained. The silence that remained was heavy with unasked questions and truths not yet revealed. Helena reached out, finding Olivia's hand with uncanny precision. "Be careful, my dear," she whispered. "Love isn't always enough to save us. Sometimes it's the very thing that condemns us." Outside, the rain continued to fall, washing away the earth over long-buried secrets in the rose garden. Somewhere inside the mansion, the piano began to play its familiar melody. But this time, Olivia was certain the notes carried a warning. The hours leading up to their evening rendezvous dragged on like a liquid eternity. Olivia spent the rest of the day in an altered state of consciousness, the words of her mother's letter echoing in her mind like a dark mantra. The mansion felt different now. Every shadow held a secret. Every corner whispered tales of forbidden love and ancient pacts. At 11:22 p.m., she was already standing in front of Arthur's office door, her heart hammering against her ribs as if it wanted to escape. The rain continued outside, a liquid curtain that isolated the mansion from the rest of the world. The clock struck 11:23 p.m., and before she could knock, the door opened. Arthur was waiting for her, standing at his desk, the metal letterbox positioned. Between them, like a dividing line, the candles were already lit, creating dancing shadows that seemed to have a life of their own. "You read the first letter," he said, his deep voice carrying a note of something that might have been sadness. "Now you understand why we need to get this right, why every truth has its time." "Where are the rest of the letters?" Olivia asked, approaching the desk. "Ah," a humorless smile curved his lips. "Is that your question for tonight?" Olivia took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. "No, my question is, what happened to my mother after that night in the garden? Is she alive?" Arthur circled the desk slowly, his movements precise and controlled like a predator's. "Before you answer, I need your secret. That's how it works, remember?" She closed her eyes for a moment, searching deep inside for a truth she had never shared. "When I was 16, she began, her voice low but steady, "there was a fire at the orphanage, small, quickly brought under control. But I saw it happen before. I dreamed about it the night before, every exact detail. And it wasn't the only time. Sometimes I see things before they happen, as if time isn't a straight line, but a circle I can observe from the outside." The air between them seemed to thicken. Arthur stepped closer, his eyes fixed on hers, with an almost painful intensity. "The gift," he murmured. "Just like her?" "Now answer me," Olivia demanded, her voice shaking slightly. "My mother, she's alive," he confirmed, and the world seemed to stop for a moment. "But not in the way you think. That night in the garden when she confronted my father about the rituals, about the pact. Something happened, something that shouldn't have been possible." He pulled away abruptly, walking over to the Venetian mirror that dominated one wall. "Have you ever wondered why we keep so many mirrors covered in this house? Why only a few remain exposed?" Helena said it was because of her blindness. "My mother is a good liar, isn't she?" Arthur laughed humorlessly. "No, mirrors are covered because sometimes they show more than reflections. Sometimes they show the other side." "What other side?" He held up a warning finger. "One question a night, remember? But to finish with your mother, she didn't die that night, but she didn't exactly stay alive either. The ritual that was interrupted created something different, a state between states." "I don't understand," Olivia whispered, even as a part of her, the part that saw the future in dreams and felt the energy pulsing through her scar, began to understand. Arthur stepped closer again, this time standing so close that she could feel the heat emanating from his body. "The mirrors, Olivia. She's in the mirrors. That's why we keep them covered. To protect her, to protect all of us. But on some nights, at some specific times—" "The visits to the orphanage," Olivia finished, feeling a shiver run down her spine. "They weren't dreams." "No," he confirmed softly. "Your mother found a way to cross over, to visit you, only for moments, only under certain conditions. That's why the timing is so important, 11:23 p.m., the moment when the veil between the worlds is thinnest." Olivia staggered slightly, feeling the weight of that revelation. Arthur grabbed her arm, steadying her, and the contact sent waves of electricity through her skin. "Why are you telling me this now?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Because you need to understand what's at stake," he replied, his eyes never leaving hers. "The ritual that was interrupted that night, it was supposed to be a ritual of bonding, between your blood and ours, between your gift and our power. Your mother was supposed to join with my father, completing a cycle that began generations ago. But she discovered the truth before it could be completed, and her rebellion created an anomaly. And now you want to complete the ritual with me," Olivia concluded, feeling her heart race. "That's why virginity is so important. That's why it has to be you." A sad smile curved Arthur's lips. "Yes and no. The ritual must be completed, one way or another, but the choice of how, that is yours." "What choice?" "You can join me, complete the cycle as it was meant to be, or—" He hesitated, something vulnerable crossing his face. "You can break it completely. Your mother left instructions in the other letters, an alternative path. But the price—" The clock began to chime, marking the end of that session. Arthur pulled away abruptly, as if the sound had awakened him from a trance. "Tomorrow," he said, his voice regaining some of its usual composure. "Bring your next question. And Olivia—" He hesitated again. "Don't try to look for the other letters. Some truths need time to reveal themselves." She left the office feeling simultaneously lighter and heavier. In the hallway, the shadows seemed thicker, more vivid. She passed one of the covered mirrors and could have sworn she saw the sheet move slightly, as if someone or something was trying to look through it. In her room, lying in bed but unable to sleep, Olivia watched the shadows dance across the ceiling as her mind whirled with the night's revelations. Her mother was alive but trapped in some sort of alternate existence, able to pass through only at specific moments, through reflections and mirrored surfaces. The scar on her hip pulsed with renewed urgency, as if it were trying to communicate something crucial. Somewhere in the mansion, the piano began to play its nightly melody, but this time Olivia paid closer attention to the notes. There was a pattern there, a coded message in the music that seemed to want to tell her something. He stood up and walked to the bathroom mirror, the only one uncovered on his floor. He stared at his reflection for long minutes, searching for, what, a sign, a message. For a moment he thought he saw another face superimposed over his own, older, wiser, with eyes that had seen too much. "Mom," he whispered to the reflection, but only silence responded. The rain continued to fall outside, washing away ancient secrets from the rose garden while new mysteries unfolded within the Aurora mansion. Somewhere between worlds, Katerina Marine watched her daughter through reflective surfaces, waiting for the right moment to reveal the rest of the truth, a truth that could save or damn them all. The morning brought with it a different clarity, as if the very air of the mansion had changed after the revelations of the previous night. Olivia found Helena in the library earlier than usual, Mrs. Aurora already in her usual armchair, but there was an uneasiness in her posture that betrayed her apparent calm. "He told you about the mirrors," Helena said as Olivia approached. It wasn't a question. "How do you always know?" Olivia asked, sitting in her usual spot at the foot of the chair. An enigmatic smile curved Helena's lips. "I lost my physical sight, my dear, but I gained other kinds of vision in the process. Some prices bring us unexpected gifts." Before Olivia could question further, the library door opened and Regina hurried in, her usually composed face showing signs of disturbance. "Mrs. Helena, forgive the interruption, but he's here again. Father Joachim." Helena sat up straight, in her chair, her entire posture changing. "Where?" "In the rose garden. He's digging something up." Olivia felt her heart race. More secrets buried in the garden? More letters from her mother? "Go," Helena said softly, as if reading his thoughts. "But remember, not all truths are ours to discover." The rose garden looked different in the morning light, the flowers glistening with dewdrops that looked like tiny diamonds. "Father," Joachim knelt next to one of the oldest rose bushes, his hands caked with dirt as he dug with almost frantic determination. "I knew you would come," he said without turning around, as if he had sensed Olivia's presence. "You have the same steps as hers, light but determined." "What are you looking for?" Olivia asked, approaching cautiously. He finally turned to face her, his clear blue eyes shining with feverish intensity. "The truth. The very thing you seek. But unlike you, I know where it is buried." Her hands found something in the dirt, a small wooden box much older and more worn than the metal letterbox. The carvings on its surface were different, more primitive, and it made Olivia's scar sting just looking at them. "Before Arthur or any other Aurora tries to stop it," the priest said, holding the box out to her, "you need to see this. You need to understand what's really at stake." With trembling hands, Olivia opened the box. Inside was a single object, an ancient silver locket, decorated with the same symbols as her scar. As her fingers touched the cool metal, a rush of images flooded her mind, flashes of memories that weren't her own but that she somehow knew intimately. A woman dancing at a ball, her red dress swirling like liquid blood. A ritual in a crypt beneath the mansion, black candles forming a circle. A newborn child with a crescent-shaped mark on her hip. A succession of female faces, all with the same eyes, all marked by the same fate. "What is it?" she asked, her voice shaking. "The true story of the Aurora," the priest replied, his voice grave, "and of the women they used to maintain their power. Each generation they seek one, a woman with the gift, with the mark. The union must be consummated in ritual, the blood must be mingled. But it is not just about power or wealth. It's about immortality." A new voice joined the conversation. Arthur stood at the entrance to the garden, his face a mask of controlled fury. "And you're interfering in things you don't understand, Joachim." The priest stood, instinctively placing himself between Olivia and Arthur. "She has the right to know, to choose. And she will know, at the right time in the right way." Arthur stepped forward, his presence seeming to bend the very air around him. "Now get off my property, before I forget your clerical status." Something passed between the two, a current of ancient, dangerous energy that made the roses tremble on their stems. Father Joachim took a step back, but his eyes never left Arthur. "Ask him about the real price," he told Olivia, "about what happens to the women after the ritual is completed, about why your mother really chose exile in the mirrors." "Enough," Arthur's voice thundered, and the sky above them darkened momentarily. The priest smiled, a sad, knowing smile. "The truth always finds a way, Arthur. You of all people should know that." With those words he turned and walked out of the garden, leaving Olivia with the locket in one hand and 1,000 new questions on her mind. Arthur remained where he was, his eyes fixed on her with an intensity that was simultaneously menacing and vulnerable. "I shouldn't have seen this yet," he said finally, his voice softer. "There is an order to the revelations, a rhythm that needs to be respected." "Why?" Olivia challenged, feeling a courage she hadn't known she possessed. "So you can manipulate me better, so I don't know the whole truth before I give myself to you?" Something crossed his face, pain, regret, desire, so quickly she almost missed it. "No," he said softly. "To protect you. Some truths are like poison. They need to be administered in small doses or they will kill." "And what else are you hiding from me? What happens after the ritual? Why did my mother choose to exile herself in the mirrors rather than—" 323, he interrupted her, his voice firm but gentle. "Save your questions for tonight. Every truth in its time, remember?" Olivia wanted to protest, wanted to demand immediate answers, but something in his gaze stopped her. There was vulnerability there, an ancient pain that echoed her own. "The medallion," he said, holding out his hand. "Please." She hesitated, her fingers tightening around the ancient metal that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. "It's mine by right. It belonged to her, didn't it? My mother?" A sad smile curved Arthur's lips. "No, it belonged to all of them. All the women who came before, all the ones who bore the mark, and yes, one day it will be yours, but not yet. Not like this." Something about the way he said it, the mix of authority and pleading in his voice, made Olivia hand over the medallion. Their fingers brushed in the process, and a current of energy shot through her body like electricity. "Tonight," he promised, his eyes fixed on hers. "Bring your questions, bring your secrets, and maybe we can find a way that doesn't end in tragedy." He was gone, taking with him the locket and his promises of truth. Olivia remained in the garden, looking at the roses that seemed redder than usual, as if they had been watered with something other than water. Somewhere inside the mansion, the piano began to play, but this time the melody was different, more urgent, as if it were trying to convey a message that couldn't wait until nightfall. And for the first time, Olivia was absolutely certain. It wasn't just a piano playing by itself. It was her mother, trying to reach her through the only language that could cross worlds. The rest of the day dragged on like a liquid eternity, each minute heavy with anticipation of the evening's encounter. Olivia couldn't concentrate on her usual tasks. The words in the book she read to Helena seemed to dance before her eyes, transforming into symbols similar to those in the locket. Helena was strangely silent, as if she too was waiting for something inevitable. As the sun began to set, she held Olivia's hand with surprising strength. "Before you go tonight," he said softly, "look in the mirror in your bedroom. Really look. She's waiting." Twilight transformed the mansion into a cathedral of shadows and whispers. In her bedroom, Olivia stared at the bathroom mirror, her heart hammering against her ribs. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, like a photograph slowly unfolding, another face began to appear in her reflection. Katerina was older than in the photo Arthur had shown her, but her eyes held the same intensity, the same fierce determination. When she spoke, her voice sounded like distant music, like the echo of the piano that always played in the mansion. "My daughter," the reflection whispered, "time is running out. Tonight, you will have to make a choice that will affect not only your destiny, but that of all who came before and all who will come after." "Mom," Olivia felt tears stream down her face, "why didn't you tell me sooner? Why did you wait so long?" A sad smile curved Katerina's lips. "Some truths must be lived to be understood. But now listen, when Arthur speaks of the ritual, of completing the cycle, he will not be lying, but he will not be telling the whole truth either. The Aurora's power comes from an ancient pact, an agreement with forces that should not be disturbed. Each generation, they need one of us, a woman with the mark, with the gift. Our energy, our lifeblood, is what keeps the pact alive. And what happens next? Olivia asked, though part of her already knew the answer. We became part of the mansion, Katerina replied softly. Part of the mirrors, part of the shadows. Not dead, not alive, trapped between worlds, fueling their power with our eternal energy. Like you. Yes, but I chose this exile. It was the only way to protect you, to ensure that you would have a choice none of us had before. The reflection began to tremble like troubled water. My time is running out, but remember, there is a way to break the cycle. The medallion with the symbols are the key. Midnight in the rose garden, Arthur, he... The image dissolved before she could finish, leaving Olivia alone with her own reflection and 1,000 unanswered questions. The clock read 11:22 p.m. Arthur's office was different that night. The candles were black, their scent more intense, more intoxicating. He was waiting for her, standing by the Venetian mirror, the medallion around his neck glowing with its own light. You talked to her, he said, as Olivia walked in. It wasn't a question. Yes. She closed the door behind her, feeling the weight of that final moment. And now I want the whole truth. No more games, no more secrets. A sad smile curved Arthur's lips. Your last question, then. Choose wisely. Olivia took a deep breath, feeling her scar pulse in tune with the medallion. What happens if I accept? If we complete the ritual, what is the true price? Arthur approached slowly, his eyes never leaving hers. The truth, then. All of it. He paused as if choosing his words carefully. The Aurora fortune, our power, our influence, it all comes from a pact made generations ago, but not with the devil, as many would assume. The pact was made with something older, more fundamental, with time itself. The weather? Yes, every generation we need a woman with the gift, someone who can see through the veil of time, someone marked from birth for this purpose. The physical union is only part of the ritual. The true purpose is to absorb this energy, this ability to transcend time. That is how we maintain our immortality, our influence through the ages. What about women? What happens to them? They become part of the pact, part of the mansion, part of the mirrors, eternal guardians of the power they helped maintain. He stepped closer, his fingers gently tracing the contours of her face. It's not death, Olivia, it's transcendence. It's power in its purest form. It's prison, she corrected gently. It's eternal slavery. Something crossed his face, pain, regret, desire. Perhaps, but it's also the only way we can maintain balance. If the pact is broken, what happens if it's broken? Arthur took a step back, his expression suddenly vulnerable. Everything crumbles. The fortune, the power, the mansion itself. It was all built on this pact. But more than that, he hesitated, something deeply human crossing his face. I would lose you, completely, forever. You're already losing me, Olivia whispered, feeling tears burn her eyes. Every truth revealed, every secret exposed, they're pushing me further away, not closer. Hurt doesn't have to be this way. He stepped closer again, his presence as engaging as ever. We could find a middle ground, a different path. There is no middle ground with eternal imprisonment, Arthur. The clock began to chime, marking not only the end of the meeting, but the beginning of something more significant. Midnight was approaching. You have to choose, Arthur said, his voice thick with restrained emotion. Now, tonight. The cycle must be completed or broken. There is no other option. Olivia felt the weight of that decision as something physical. Her hands went to the scar on her hip, which pulsed in tune with the medallion around Arthur's neck. There's always another option, she said softly, taking a step toward him. You can choose too, Arthur. You can choose to break the cycle not out of obligation, but out of love. Something shifted in the air between them. An old tension began to dissolve, replaced by something deeper, more true. Arthur looked at her, as if he were truly seeing her for the first time. Love, he repeated the word as if tasting it. Is that how you feel about me? Even after everything I've revealed? "Is that how you feel about me?" she asked back. "Strong enough to give it all up to find a new path?" The medallion began to glow brighter, its ancient inscriptions pulsing with light of their own. Through the mansion's covered mirrors, echoes of women's voices began to whisper. All the women who had come before, all those who had been sacrificed for the pact. Arthur brought his hands to the locket, his fingers trembling slightly. "If I choose you, choose love over pact. Then we will find a new kind of power," Olivia finished, placing her hands over his. "One that doesn't demand sacrifice. That doesn't feed on imprisonment and pain." The clock began to strike midnight. In the rose garden, flowers began to glow with unearthly light. Through the mirrors, ancient voices sang a song that was both lamentation and celebration. With one smooth movement, Arthur removed the medallion and placed it around Olivia's neck. The ancient metal burned against her skin for a moment, then fit as if it had always belonged to her. "I choose you," he whispered, his voice hoarse with emotion. "I choose love." The last stroke of midnight echoed through the mansion. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, like a ripple spreading, every covered mirror in the house exploded with light. Women's voices, decades, centuries of women trapped, rose in a chorus of liberation. The mansion shook to its foundations. In the gardens, the roses began to wither and bloom again in accelerated cycles. The piano in the library played its last melody, a song of farewell and new beginning. Through the Venetian mirror, Olivia saw her mother one last time. Caterina was smiling, truly smiling, as her form began to dissolve into pure light. "Love," his voice echoed like music, "has always been the key. The true power has never been in the pact, but in the ability to choose love above all else." The light grew brighter until it was almost unbearable. When it finally dimmed, the mirrors in the mansion were just that, mirrors. The weight of centuries, of pacts and imprisonments had melted away, leaving only the potential for a new beginning. Arthur held Olivia in his arms, both of them shaking with the intensity of the moment. The Aurora fortunes would begin to wane. The power built on their pact would gradually dissipate. But something new had been born, something built not on sacrifice and imprisonment, but on choice and love. "What now?" Olivia asked softly, her fingers intertwined with his. "Now," Arthur replied, a genuine smile lighting his face, "we write our own story. No pacts, no rituals, just us, just love." Outside, the rose garden bloomed with colors never before seen, flowers that owed nothing to ancient pacts that grew for the simple joy of being. The Aurora mansion would still hold its secrets, but now they were just stories to be remembered, not prisons to be kept. And somewhere beyond the mirrors, beyond the veil of time, Catherine and all the other women finally found their rest, knowing that the cycle had been broken not by force or sacrifice, but by the most fundamental power of all, the ability to choose love over fate.